out there? It's me, Brianna, and today I am joined by my co host and friend, Sam. You are listening to episode 4 of Are We Caught Up Yet? Marvel Edition. You can find us on youtube.com/Save the Game Media and podcast services. If you want to show Save the Game Media some extra love and get early access to all of our content, you can find us at patreon.com/Save the Game Media. $1 will get you a bunch of post shows. I think it's 7 a month right now. And I think we have one exclusive show currently to Patreon, which is The Leftovers. But before we get started, how are you today, Sam?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Um, as of yesterday, time of recording, we did a no limit show, and I felt okay, and that has, for the most part, persisted across today. Little bit worse today, but it's still within reason. Quite manageable, the pain level of everything. I'm looking forward to whatever discussion is about to ensue. The weather is pretty terrible here in good old rainy England, but it's we're keeping nice and toasty. I've got some nice woolly socks on, although you're going to be able to see them. But
Yeah.
how are you, Brie?
I am doing well. I slept and then woke up and got ready for this, and that's basically all I've done today.
Hell yeah.
Yesterday I did a bunch of crocheting. I am like just a crochet machine recently because it's easy to just sit and watch The Office and crochet. So that's what I've been doing. And then in terms of actually, you know what? I want you to go first. What have you been watching?
Not a lot. Again, I do keep saying it. I'm a busy boy. I don't get to watch too much recently. Obviously, I've watched the film that we will be discussing today. That people can already see the title of this video, so that's not much of a surprise. But the only other thing I've been watching is Succession on HBO. Or Sky Atlantic in the UK, because we don't have HBO Max or anything. It is the best television show on right now. I highly encourage everybody to at least give it a go. It is one of the shows that it's a show where like every character is just an awful human being, but instead of like leaning into the horribleness, it's done for laughs. It's like a comedy more so than anything, and the writing and the performances are just top notch. Like, it boggles the mind how talented some of that cast are. And without spoilers, because it's series 3, 4, series 3 or 4, I can't remember which series it's on. That's airing right now, and there's been some real big developments over the past 2 weeks episodes. So yeah, things are spicing up, and I've been enjoying that. What about you?
So I have been kind of watching a little bit of this and that. Since we
What's this and that?
well, I kind of have been doing a really bad thing where I just start a bunch of shows and never finish anything. Every once in a while I do that where I'm like, you know what, I just want to start this. Then I'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna start
You
this.
starting something and not finishing it? Don't be stupid. Never
It
heard of it.
gets really, yeah, that's what I'm saying. If I tell you it's bad, like it's pretty bad. But since we have last spoke for this podcast, I have seen the Mario movie, I have seen the Dungeons and Dragons movie, and I have now seen Suzume, which is the it's a new anime film by the director of Your Name and Weathering with You. It was amazing. And the day after I watched the movie, I went to the Radwimps concert, and they're the people that did the soundtrack for the movie, so that was really cool. um so yeah, that's I've been watching those in terms of movies. And then for TV shows, the one I will so I've been rewatching The Office, which I probably shouldn't, but I'm like, I think I started it like maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 at the most, and I'm already in season 8. So that's almost
Wow.
my time. Other than that, I've started watching Our Flag Means Death, which I should have watched forever ago. It is so funny, and I love it so much. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
It's so good. I could not get over that they were doing, like, essentially that email scam where it's like, "This prince needs your money." They were doing an email scam, but they did it at a party, and I couldn't stop laughing. It's it's so good. I love it so much. So, yeah, that's the other thing I've been watching. I think I'm, like, halfway through that, so good stuff. Yeah, I think been watching a bunch of other stuff, but we could stop there. Um, so today we're talking about Thor. So we're gonna go ahead and start with, just spoiler-free general thoughts on the film. You wanna go first?
No, you go first, Brie. I'm interested.
Um, spoiler-free general thoughts. I think that I enjoyed this film. I really did enjoy this film. I think that it was I I am more inclined to enjoy, like, mythology stuff, and so since this is heavily leaning on mythology, I think that I was more inclined to enjoy it right off the bat. Um, hmm, I thought it was good fun, and some of the stuff was a little cheesy and dumb, but not in a bad way, just was.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay. Right. Fair enough. Um, it's a highly controversial opinion, but I genuinely really do quite love this film. Um, it is something that, upon like initial release, I didn't think all that much of. I mean, like you, I'm a mythology nut. I love stuff in any mythology, really. Greek, Norse, doesn't matter. Um, those two specifically, though, were sort of always the key ones for me. So I enjoyed that aspect, similar to you. But other than that, it didn't really do all that much. But with each time I rewatch it, I seem to like it more and more. Um, I, we're not with you, Brie. We're not quite at the level where we're able to effectively discuss phases yet
Mm,
within the MCU.
but this is all
Um,
phase 1.
it is indeed, yes. I am maybe kind of future spoilering some stuff. Nothing like in terms of plot, but in terms of like discussion. Um, this is and has been for a good few years actually. My favorite Phase One film. Um, I admit, similar to you, it has some very cheesy stuff in it. I think that there is a fair amount of humor in it that doesn't work, but in my opinion, uh, the the humor that does work in this film works better than most other humor we've seen, at least up to this point, in Marvel films. I think that the dynamic that it introduces, both in terms of types of characters, locations, ideas, um, within this universe, I think it is, for the fourth film in this franchise. It is quite a bold step, in my opinion. Going from two Iron Man films and the Hulk to having this sort of grand Shakespearean thing, um, where it's all about someone learning to be worthy of greatness, of the power that they have taken for granted for so long. It's very similar to Tony Stark's arc in the first Iron Man, in the sense that both start out their respective films with, severe egos and a sense of entitlement, and they are, by one method or another, removed from that source of power, and they have to find their way back one way or another. And in my opinion, I think that the journey for Thor is more compelling than Iron Man's. I think Hemsworth is excellent in the role. That continues to be the case going forward. There's still some growing pains, but I just think that there's so many positives to this film. The cast is just ridiculous. We're talking Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Anthony Hopkins, Idris Elba, even someone small like, or not small, but like Stellan Skarsgård or Rene Russo as Thor's mom. It's like that. The cast, when you step back and look at it, is just so phenomenal. I don't know whether that necessarily translates for somebody who, isn't trained in acting and is supposed to know every single actor's name and things like that. I don't know whether that translates as much. But yeah, and this film was directed by Kenneth Branagh. Kenneth Branagh, which is he is a saint to me as someone who has adored Shakespeare my entire life. It's weird that he didn't put himself in this film, because he does in most of his other stuff. But it bleeds Shakespeare, this film. And that for me is automatic plus 10 points. So I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's great. I think it's the character of Thor is just such a great addition so early on. His sort of boastfulness, but also naivety about how things work. He's like a fish out of water, and that stuff just always works for me. And it's done really well here. That was more than just surface level thoughts. I apologize. But,
it wasn't overly spoilerly, so it's totally fine.
That's where we're at.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad that you enjoy it. I thought, like I said, I thought it was good. So, you've been warned. We're going to jump into spoilers now, per usual. Although I suspect that most people here have already seen it. So, I don't know what you would be doing here otherwise, but it's okay. I do want to just take a brief note on the soundtrack. I feel like the soundtrack is very similar to the others, where it's generic, but I think there were a few themes that kind of stuck out a little bit, where I was like, oh, okay, we're getting some personality in the soundtrack. Yeah. So that was exciting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that it's hard to discern exactly whether it's a character theme or sort of more. I mean, I guess there's a few, that do stick out, but whether it's just the main theme that plays over the credits or something that has, comes up a number of times throughout the film. But even just some of the music that plays, especially over sort of panning shots of Asgard, it's grandiose in a way, like you say, where we haven't really seen that in the other films, because the other films, for want of a better word, have been very grounded. Obviously, they're fantastical, but in terms of a direct comparison to this, where we are on essentially a different planet or dimension with godlike beings, well, what, not just godlike gods, it's fitting, I think, that they haven't quite got there. I agree with you in terms of the score, where there isn't necessarily there's none of the music in this film could come back in a future film and I would immediately recognize it necessarily. And I'd be like, oh, that's what this means, where they could start playing it before they show Asgard. And I'm like, oh my God, something's about to happen in Asgard. Which is really what you want, because it's nice to be clued in through musical cues. But there are rumblings of something there. I'm with you 100% on that. So steps in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. I was pleasantly surprised. Okay, I will allow you to select. Do you want to go characters or themes next?
Oh, let's go themes.
Okay.
Let's go themes.
Okay. So I think one of the biggest themes is probably I feel like it's I'm trying to think of how to phrase it, but it's essentially like almost like being Odin's son in different ways, right? Because Loki is his son, even though he
Hmm.
isn't, and Thor is as well, and they're both trying to be better sons in weird ways for Loki in particular.
Yeah.
Um and Thor, so I feel like they're almost like a reflection of each other where Loki really wants to be his son and he's not, versus Thor is like trying to rebel against his father almost,
Hmm.
but like is. So they're like
Yeah.
almost like reflections of each other in that way. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
You know, it's really hard to talk about it. Being as passionate as I am, it's hard to talk about it without sounding like I'm just sort of ass kissing the film or
Yeah.
just the MCU in general. But I
Well,
do
that's what you're here
genuinely,
for.
I mean, yes, of course. But also, you know, I try to be level headed and reasonable in my praise, or at least justify it.
Hmm.
Um, and I do legitimately think that is some really quite nuanced thematical storytelling going on here. It's not necessarily immediately apparent, and they don't execute it perfectly, even to an extent where it's immediately noticeable. But once you start like thinking about it, 100% with you, where Thor and Loki are, you know, stereotypically brothers that are completely unalike, but they are also they also have more similarities than they are willing to admit.
Hmm.
They are both incredibly flawed people, um, and for different reasons. There's like a Thor doesn't have to prove anything to anyone, but Loki feels like he has to prove everything. Without even before he figures out the truth about his you know his true nature and his upbringing.
Hmm.
Um, he has always been, like he said, in the shadow of Thor. Thor has always been the poster child, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, where you aren't necessarily the younger child or anything, but you might be a child that maybe isn't in the moment excelling as much as another sibling, and you are naturally therefore inclined to feel that the spotlight is on that child, and that even if you're doing everything you can, which Loki is, you still feel like you're a disappointment. Um, and that can lead to volatility in family dynamics and stuff. This is just a family drama film
Hmm.
at the end of the day. It's a big
With high
soap opera.
stakes.
Yeah, it's a big old soap opera with lots of explosions.
Hmm.
Um, and I I I think not only in terms of like the contrast between Loki and Thor as brothers, but you kind of get the duality of Thor both with and without his powers at the same time as Loki feeling devalued, depowered, and then, you know, by nefarious means, sort of taking that power, and sort of filling a vacuum that comes about because of Thor's exile. I just think it's really well executed overall. That, you know, they do a really good job, or at least they try really hard throughout the film when Thor is not powered up at the start or at the end, but in the middle, where you kind of forget that he's a god, but the reason that's happening is because he's also forgetting that he's a god.
Hmm.
You know, he's had all of these privileges taken away from him, and he's just around everyday folk that are just doing their science stuff. And because not only, like I said, is he a fish out of water, but because he knows that in some way he needs to get that power back, he goes from he goes from doing it for a selfish reason to like an altruistic, selfless reason. And that happens very naturally, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
where he goes to pick up Mjolnir and he sort of is very nonchalant and he's bashing security guards out of the way. And then when he realizes he can't lift it, he's like depressed. He is like, what am I without the hammer? Which it sounds a bit reductive saying it like that, but that's essentially what it is. And by the end of the film, he is sacrificing himself. And I just, again, going back to like a comparison to Iron Man, I just don't think that Tony ever really got there.
Mm-hmm.
The closest comparable moment is when in the first Iron Man, he tells Pepper to hit the button that sends the electricity up whilst he's still hanging over. And like that, in terms of a moment, it accomplishes the same kind of thing. I just think that moment in Thor, where he confronts the destroyer and it just sort of smacks him and he's practically
Oh
dead.
yeah, that was a full bitch slap for
I
sure.
just sent him flying.
Yeah.
Damn.
I've never been slapped that hard.
Whoa. I challenge somebody to try and slap me that hard. Yeah, I just think it's there are very similar moments in both of those films, but I just think that across the board, Thor executes them better.
Yeah, I would agree that Thor definitely executes them better. It feels like there's more, like slightly more follow through with the
Mm,
storyline, and I think that that's kind of what helps it out is that there's not necessarily like a lot more depth in the
no,
story. It's just more of like the follow through with like we're telling you this story and we're actually going to show you like what happens because of this kind of thing.
yeah, because Iron Man, it does devolve into, oh, it's just a big iron thing hitting another metal thing,
Mhm.
and Jeff Bridges gets in the big metal suit out of nowhere, and you're like, well, where the bloody hell did that come from?
Mhm.
Um, Whereas with this, as much as Thor is fighting against the destroyer, he is in essence in that moment. I mean, obviously he goes back to Asgard and fights Loki, but in that moment, even when the destroyer is there, he is fighting Loki. He's speaking to Loki,
Mhm.
and Loki is using the destroyer as like a vessel to exact, emotional vengeance on Thor by beating him to a pulp because he knows that he couldn't do it if it was just hand to hand. Which again is like, it's sad for Loki. Like you can't help but feel sorry for him,
Mhm.
which is why I think so many people have connected with Loki over the years, and why I think
I mean,
he's
he is very
probably the most interesting character in the film.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, it's I've got plenty of good things to say.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I do want to like, and I know this is like partially just like me interacting with the film and not necessarily like true depth in the film, but I do want to say that like I think like in terms of like themes and stuff, I feel like this film made me stop and think a lot, especially when he said like I've always known what to do. For some reason that really like stuck out to me because I was thinking about it in terms of like people that have bigger roles to play in life, like gods, like royalty, like stuff like that, they do always have something to do, right? Like there's like
Yeah.
as a ruler or as some sort of like leader, you do always have something that you need to be doing. Like
Mm-hmm.
and that like was really weird for me because I was like thinking about like how it's like almost like versus like especially like if you're talking in terms of like a fantasy setting where it's like gods versus peasants or royalty versus peasants or whatever. Like the peasants do have stuff to do obviously because they have to survive and they're like farming or whatever they're doing, right? They just don't have like they just don't have as much to do. And I was
Yeah.
thinking about that a lot, which again, I think was my fault for like how I was interacting with the film and not necessarily like true depth in the film, but that line really stood out to me. So I thought I should shout it out.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, that plays into the theme of, you know, what you're supposed to do and what you have to do,
Hmm.
uh, and that correlates to people in real life. You are set on a path more often than not where there are clearly things that are going to happen in the future. If, you know, this step leads to this, to this, to this, and sometimes you feel like you need to or have to deviate from that path, and that's a difficult thing to do, and you often catch a lot of flack for doing it, but sometimes it's necessary. And, you know, Thor is set up to be the ruler of Asgard, but that's just not who he is. He thinks that he is. He thinks he can do it with his eyes closed at the start of the film, but he realizes, you know, not only how fragile all of it is, as much as there's so much pomposity and grandeur in Asgard, he realizes that because his power gets taken away like within seconds, he realizes the fragility of it all. And then on top of that, he goes down to Earth, experiences humanity, and, you know, he thinks about how fragile these people are compared to him. You know, he's lived for 1,000 years, and he's never really had the contextual experience to inform him about like how how important life is and the value there is in making your time alive worth it. um and again, without spoilers, it's good that you picked up on it, that, you know, Thor is sort of saying, I've always known what to do. And that's a theme, if we're talking about through lines, that will persist with Thor as a character. Of, he's obviously not set to rule Asgard. He or at least he's not in a position to do it right now. So what does he do with all the power? You know, with all the power that he has, there is that responsibility there in some form. But how does he channel that? What does that look like? Um, yeah, it's there's good stuff here. I promise, everyone. I promise. Believe me, please.
It is pretty good. Let's see. Is there any other themes that you wanted to talk about?
I think those are the main ones, really. I guess it's just like quickly worth reiterating the whole like fish out of water thing. Um, Obviously, when he gets thrown down to earth, he doesn't really have any idea how anything works. I will never forget the interaction when he has going into the pet shop. Like, that is just something that will never get old to me.
Yeah.
For people that can't remember or haven't seen it, that he walks in and he's like, I need a horse. And the pet shop owner is like, oh, we obviously don't have horses here. He's like, well, what do you have? And he said, we have cats and dogs. And then Thor just goes, give me one of those big enough to ride. It's just like, it's so good. It's so good. And it wouldn't work if Hemsworth didn't sell it.
Hmm.
Um, and he's great at playing like a ditzy, a ditzy blonde,
Oh,
um,
for
for
sure.
want of a better word.
He's yeah, no, for sure. Himbo.
Yeah. Drinking the coffee in the diner and then just sort of slamming the cup on the floor. Another.
Yeah.
Um, it's that comedy. It has always and will continue to work for me.
Mm,
Um, and not that that's necessarily a theme that continues forever with him, because obviously you would expect that he does sort of acclimatize. But at least for the near future, there is more of that. And I almost kind of wish, especially again, every time I watch this, I like it more. um I kind of wish that there was still an element of that to his character in present day Marvel. um and there is, but it's like it's a shell of what it is in this film.
yeah.
I still think there's just so much potential, and ripeness for comedy, in so many
Untapped
different
comedy for
situations.
I love
Um,
that.
but
Yeah.
never mind.
Oh well. Maybe next one.
Maybe next one.
Okay, so um I think kind of moving to characters, I think we touched most of them, but I specifically wanted to ask, does this pass the Bechdel test? I think it does, right? Because there's the two scientists that are both named. And
Yes.
so I think by nature of those two scientists,
I
I think
can't
it
say with
passes.
100% certainty, but I'm pretty sure that yeah, because to begin with, in
They're
the
just
beginning of the
chatting.
film,
Yeah.
definitely Darcy and Jane are speaking about the hibbly jibbly science stuff. Um,
Okay.
so yes, it does pass it.
Yes.
Yes.
That's good. Okay. Yeah. I thought so, but I just was like, I couldn't remember specifically until we started talking about it. Okay. In terms of characters,
Mm.
mm, I'm trying to think if there's anything in particular I want to say. I feel like I think they could have done more with I think you said her name was Darcy. I think they could have done
Hmm.
a little bit more with her. Like I feel like I didn't love her character. Maybe I wasn't supposed to, but I don't know. Didn't love her. I also kind of wanted more of like the his crew of friends. Like I feel like we did get to see them. Um, but I think I just wanted more because like I really loved like all of those characters. Um,
The Warriors
and
3.
yeah, that's that's when I sent Sam a message about like all my thoughts. It was mostly it wasn't like any real thoughts about the film. It was just like, oh, damn, like his ass and stuff. Like that. That's basically all I was doing. But I was like, okay, but like how do I like get a Warriors 3 to follow me around? Because that's really what I'm trying to do here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, I really did like them. They were really funny. And yeah, I hope that Thor does not take them for granted moving forward because I feel like in that fight scene initially, like when his friend got hurt, he like had no reaction. He was just like, "Oh, he's fine." Like,
Mm.
and I feel like I don't know, I wouldn't be in that situation, but if I was somehow in that situation, I think I would freak out and be like, "Oh God, they're hurt! Like, do something!" Like, I don't know. I think I would have done something more than just like continue to kill enemies. So I hope that he doesn't have
Again,
to do those kind of
Thor
things.
thinks he's invulnerable, and that sort of that he's very nearsighted in that regard. He doesn't really, even for fellow Asgardians, he doesn't really consider that isn't necessarily the case for everybody else because he's never
Mhm.
had to.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I'm with you. It's a shame that the Warriors 3 haven't really. I think there were plenty of opportunities. I mean, I'm going to hold the thought because I don't want to get too indicative of anything.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that there is definitely potential for the Warriors 3 and the dynamic that they have with Thor to develop moving forward for sure.
Okay. Cool. Is there any other characters that you wanted to say? Ah, yeah, that's a good one. I like
Heimdall.
that he like helped himself. He didn't need rescuing.
Yeah, Idris Elba is just you know that hot. He can break out of ice that
I
easily.
mean,
Just
with those colored contacts, my God,
yeah, you
that
can
was an
see
extra
everything.
level I was not ready for.
Yeah, can see anything and everything. He
Yeah,
can see into your soul and what you're thinking and stuff like that. Again, like slightly underutilized, I'd say.
that's what I was just
Um,
thinking. Actually, like I feel like they could have done more.
but like like not that again they. I just said again like 5 times. Not that they perfectly execute a lot of stuff in this film, but I think all of the concepts and the majority of the characters that they introduce are really interesting and present a lot of possibilities going forward. Like now that, again, I said again, um, the thing that I will reiterate as we go is that as much as we have to view each of these films as individual projects and analyze them as such. There is an element of, we know that there is more coming, and we know that it starts to interconnect and whatnot. So the thing that always excites me and continues to excite me to this day when new characters are introduced is the idea that now this person, this personality, this power set, these abilities, they just exist. They are in this world now, and the potential for character interaction and development through that interaction sort of exponentially gets greater as more of these characters are brought in. So, you know, we have Thor, we have Loki, we have the Warriors 3, we have Heimdall. All of them bring something different and interesting that we haven't seen thus far.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as like we aren't necessarily going to see the Warriors 3 interact with Rhodey from the Iron Man films, there is still the potential there, and there will be bleed over with certain characters.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of, I think that's one of the main exciting things, because if you connect with a character in a project, you're thinking about the possibilities of who they might end up meeting. And there are dynamics you can immediately begin to imagine in your head, like what happens when Thor starts talking to Tony, like ego
Mm-hmm.
versus ego, but one of
Oh
them is like
God.
a Shakespearean god, and the other one is like a narcissistic, sarcastic playboy. You know, it's like this, that immediately that is interesting. So it's like I'm just, it's really cool. It's cool. It's cool. Like I'm fangirling too much. I got to stop.
No, it's good. I did, speaking of like, okay, so just kind of like touching on the through line stuff, because you kind of like started talking about it a little bit.
Mm.
One, okay, when he was like son of Cole, like when Coulson
Just
was there, that was so
perfect.
funny.
Perfect.
But also, just speaking of like Coulson, like when he was like, "Oh, this must," he's like, "Tony never tells me anything." Like, I thought that was really funny too. But it's also a reference to the other films, which is
Mm-hmm.
cool. And then I think so. Well, so this time I did for sure catch Stanley. And I thought that moment was really funny as well, where
Yeah.
he was like, "Did we get it?"
Definitely not.
And then the other part that I suspect might be a through line, but I don't know for sure, is the guy that was using the bow and arrow. I
Oh.
feel like he's probably one of the heroes in future films, but I don't know that for
Oh.
100% certainty. Um,
Oh.
so
Have to wait and see, won't you?
I guess I will.
Good that you. I mean, not that it's particularly difficult to catch that moment, because it's just a guy with a bow and arrow. But yeah, you know, maybe it is worth remembering. You know, yeah,
Maybe,
who knows? Maybe.
maybe. Okay, cool. So I would say that's what I caught in terms of through line.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, obviously beyond the fact that they talk about like, oh, like we have to go to is it New Mexico?
Yeah, yeah.
We have to go to New Mexico because something happened. Like that's the only other, but that was like in a different film leading to this. So
Hmm. I think that's it in terms of through lines that have sort of arisen thus far. I'm just racking my brain to think
I
of
mean,
anything else.
technically, Agents of Shield. And like we see, I
Sure.
don't even know the character at the very end in the ending credits, like at the end of the credits. Um, what's his face?
Oh yes,
We see
yes,
that
of
briefly as
course.
well, but like I think those are technically through lines as well, but not as like on the nose, I don't think.
Um, yeah, I'm just having to double check, because I can't remember if there's a connecting thing.
Well, so it shows Loki kind of like almost possessing the scientist dude.
Yes, Yeah.
But then he's meeting the other scientist dude, which seems to be that they like know each other.
Because so we can determine that Loki did not in fact die at the end of the film. Obviously, that post credit confirms that. But there are, again, I'm not going to say anything, but that post credit does definitely have something else in it that will become particularly relevant very soon.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they were looking at this thing and talking about it and saying that it's got a lot of potential and it's worth a look. And
You're talking about like the
we're
realm travel stuff?
sort of it's definitely something. But who knows exactly what it is. I do, but I'm not going to tell you.
I'm glad you answered your own question. Okay, so is there anything else you wanted to cover, like on characters, themes, through line story, or just like overall story for this?
I think the only other character I shout out very briefly is Odin.
Mm,
Not necessarily so much for the character, because he isn't given all that much to do. But I think that Anthony Hopkins' performance is, I mean, he's just an astounding actor anyway. But he has the gravitas and the commanding, booming voice that you would sort of anticipate from Odin. But he's never cruel. I think he toes the line perfectly in being a somewhat distant father that is sort of very well worn and not detached is the wrong word, but sort of one step removed from his sons, because he knows that he has, especially with Thor, given him pretty much everything on a silver golden platter for so long, his entire life. And it's only really at the beginning of the film when Thor acts out and gets people hurt and almost invokes a war between realms where he's like, I've made a mistake. And again, it's like, not that it does it super well, but touching on the idea of, parenting and how difficult that is, and the idea that you want to spoil your kids and give them the best life possible, but sometimes it's a harsh reality or a rude awakening that is the best possible course of action. Tough love. Obviously, it's taken to a bit of an extreme here, but I still think that there is relevancy in that, and I think that as much as it's not touched on super well or super in depth, it is still there. So it's worth mentioning, and also, like, again, just the fact that they managed to get an actor as sort of legacied as Anthony Hopkins to put on a spangly golden suit and wear an eye patch and stuff. It's like that's pretty cool, man. That, like, they can get that caliber of actor to join on to, and obviously he got paid so much money, and it's about the money more than anything. But there's clearly a desire for actors to be in this universe, and obviously it's financially beneficial to them. It's essentially a guarantee of a job for at least a few years, just due to the nature of how this storytelling and interconnectivity pans out. But I'd like to think as well that it is, speaking as an actor, the ability to stretch your creative wings a bit, and also just to have a bit of fun.
Mhm.
Like, especially somebody like Anthony Hopkins, he's done so many serious roles throughout his life, both on stage and on screen. And like, that's great. That's awesome. But I think anybody would be lying to themselves if they didn't imagine every now and then being a bit of a kid again, and just having fun and dressing up and running around the room, shouting at things that aren't really there, but playing pretend. It's like there is a magic there. I think that if you give yourself into it, it's quite intoxicating. Um, and this being as magical of a world that they introduce, I think it all ultimately comes together to be greater than the sum of its parts, I think.
Okay. I really like that. Just talking about like Odin a little bit as well in terms of like parenting being difficult. I can understand like how he made the decision to um essentially not tell Loki that like it's not like that basically he's adopted, right? Like because
Mm-hmm.
this is something we see frequently in real life. Like when do you tell somebody that they're adopted? Like
Yeah.
how do you tell them? Like do you tell them that kind of stuff? Um and I think that him deciding to not tell Loki had very real consequences. But I almost wonder if he would have ended up like the same way even if he had told him. Do you know what I mean? Because
That
Loki, the way that Loki takes it is like, well, clearly you didn't tell me because you don't think I'm your son, but like why that doesn't like his line of logic doesn't make sense to me.
mhm.
And
No,
you know.
I'm with you, and I think that is an issue that parents that adopt in real life struggle with,
Mhm.
because
Absolutely.
there is never really a good time to tell the kid. And again, it might be generalizing slightly. Obviously, I am not adopted, so I can't speak from firsthand experience, but I have read plenty of sort of testimonies from um, kids that were adopted, or adults that were adopted as kids, should I say, um, that said that even before they were told, even if they were treated exactly the same as their other siblings, they kind of like knew that something not wasn't right, but that there was something going on,
Mhm.
that there was a truth that wasn't being aired. And I think that again, it's kind of reflected in this, where I can't say that Odin, not that we really see it all that much, but I'm not. I've never been under the impression that Odin treated Loki too differently. There was
Mhm.
definitely a difference, but I don't think that it was favoritism in the sense of Thor got everything and Loki got nothing.
Mhm.
I think it's more that, and Loki says something to that effect in the film, but I think that's more like a spiteful
Yeah.
bitterness than actual truth.
Yeah.
And that's fair. If that is what Loki perceives to be his truth, that's fine. That's valid enough. Um, Obviously, he acts on it in a very negative, bad way, but yeah, it's just, again, it's a family drama. It's a tough situation where there isn't really a correct answer, because is an argument can be made that Loki was better off knowing from the start and could have still been part of the family, but would have known his true nature growing
Mhm.
up. But if there is the chance, it's the fear of the unknown. What if Odin did tell him when he was younger
Mhm.
and completely rebelled, and then Thor would have lost a brother, and the family would have lost one of their members.
Mhm.
But by not telling him, that has also happened.
Mhm.
So it's a lose lose. And I like that complexity, because it sounds stupid, but it feels real. um the dynamics between the characters, as much as they are in very heightened situations, at the end of the day, the emotional realities that the characters are going through is incredibly grounded, in my opinion, and incredibly relatable. And that this is coming from me, who hasn't really had anything similar to that experience with an adopted sibling or just a sibling in general.
Yeah.
So
I've had a slightly similar experience. I'm not adopted, to be very clear. But like I have kind of felt that like ostracization
mhm,
slightly, in terms of like, so I have two half siblings, and so my mom remarried and had two kids. And I don't consider them to be half siblings. They are just my siblings. But at the same time, it felt weird because the entire family had one last name and I had a different last name. And so there was like always like a lot of confusion with what was going on with that.
mhm,
Um, and like there were other things that kind of happened where it was like I was kind of like the one kid out. I mean, like in terms of like age gap, like I'm like 10 years older than my sister and 6 years older than my brother. Like, so there's
mhm.
just like a bunch of stuff like that where I was like almost like slightly like away from my siblings. But I don't know. Like I think that's like obviously a different experience than being adopted, but that's the closest I can come to, I guess, relating to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's see. One thing I did want to like kind of talk about is the set design. And I know I'm biased. I don't think I liked the set design because of God of War. Seeing Asgard like in the God of War way was like so powerful. Like the way that the realm looked, it was just perfect. So going from that to this was almost like disappointing. Like,
See, I had the exact same experience, but in reverse,
mm,
where obviously I was exposed to this version of Asgard for many years
mm-hmm.
before we saw Asgard in Ragnarok.
So you don't like the God of War version?
Not that I don't like it, but
Oh
I was underwhelmed by it.
no, you're crazy.
I was like, huh, there's this big stone wall. That's interesting. And then I was expecting, like, to be fair, most other depictions of Asgard, at least in sort of visual mediums, have been, where it is a bit more this glowing temple, not necessarily as glittering as it is in this film, to be fair, but it was very understated in
Mm,
Ragnarok.
I like
Undeniably,
it.
like, gorgeous, but it was just like a bunch of
Yeah.
wooden huts.
Yeah, I think like the city itself I did really like, but I think what really stood out to me was like the view of like the
Mm,
endless like rolling hills and stuff like
yeah.
that. Like that view is like so stunning. So stunning. Anyways, I thought that was worth a shout out just because we both played God of War.
Mm.
Okay, ranking, my guess is this is number 1 and going above Iron Man for you.
This is indeed at the
Okay.
top.
Okay, cool. It is for me as well. I think that um it was really good. And also Norse mythology.
Yeah.
Bias coming through. Um anything else that you wanted to say? I don't want to like
Um, I would just say, if anybody has already seen this film but hasn't watched it for a while, I'd encourage you to go back and give it another go, particularly if you are still like a passive Marvel fan, but you have seen some of the more recent um, iterations of not only this character but just the films in general. Um, Not only will this film, like, hopefully, and I imagine, elicit like a good sense of nostalgia, because this is far more basic than we are at now in current MCU timeline. Things get real wild. Um, so it's nice to sort of go back to again, a simple sense of sort of gaining humanity and earning redemption and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I would encourage people to go back and give it another go, even if you didn't necessarily like it all that much the first time, because that is the general consensus, that a lot of people just don't like this film. And I, again, my opinion, it's fine. People are allowed to have different opinions, but I
Mm-mm,
don't really comprehend how you couldn't like this film. I think there is
mm.
so much good stuff in it. It's not perfect. an argument could be made that it's not even great, but I just think
Yeah.
that compared to some of the stuff that we've gotten thus far, if that other stuff feels, and I hate saying this, it hurts my heart to say it, but in comparison, that other stuff that we've gotten thus far feels a bit generic in comparison. Um, and this is not necessarily a massive creative swing in terms of what they're going for, but I think they are. This is like the first step in taking big strides in going balls to the wall and just trying out new, weird, interesting concepts. And not only that, but finding ways to make it all work together. That's the most impressive thing. And again, like, we didn't talk about it that much, but the fact that Coulson is in this and it is flawlessly integrated into the narrative, where it's not like, oh, look, it's me, I'm coming back from Iron Man 2, ha ha ha. It's just he's there on a mission and he's speaking to Thor for a couple of minutes and then he's done. That's just, and the further we get in, the more complex and interwoven everything. It's just good. Just give it a go. Just trust me. I'm
Okay, I will. I'll try.
I was speaking
I
more
mean,
to
we're
the
here.
audience
I
there
was
than
gonna say
you.
we're already here, so
Yeah, you're sort of already
I'm
on the
locked
train.
in. Oh no.
But I'm just I
What would
like
you
I
have
like getting
done?
people on board.
What would you have done if I was like, I don't like this film? Like I just came in and was like,
That's fine. I
I
can guarantee that as we go on, there will be severe divergences in opinion.
guess
Um,
we'll see.
but it's fine. You can like what you like and dislike what you dislike. You don't have to feed into my fanboyism.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. And I don't know, chatting with us about Thor. You should come hang out in the Discord to chat with us. Um,
Yeah.
Sam shows up every once in a while if you talk about Marvel, so
Yeah. I'm very bad at replying, but as soon as anything Marvel is mentioned, I'm like a hound
all
dog
of a
and just,
sudden he's there. Yeah,
you
it's crazy.
say what? Say what?
That or Severance. I feel like that's the other
Don't. Whoa,
one.
that's something I want to watch again, and I've
Uh,
only recently finished watching it.
mm,
It's so good.
it's so good. It is really good. Okay. Thank you so much. I just want to give a special shout out, obviously, to our patrons. So that's going to be Bucky Blue, Hoppel, Alpaca Tom, Amon, Fabulous Brianna, Brianna's mom, Brianna's brother, Brianna's wife, Nikolai at Night, Cypher Primus, Brendan Myers, Marcus O'Neill, Lillian, Mimi J, The Snack Network, David Hotwright, Dave Harp, and the Xbox Expansion Pass. So thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate you. Where can people find you?
People can find me in a local theatre watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 on the 3rd of May. Everybody, it's only a few days away. I'm so excited, but it'll already be out by the time that this video goes live. So I don't
Oh
know what
yeah,
I'm
it'll be
saying.
out like a month ago.
I loved Guardians of the Galaxy Volume
Actually,
3.
only
Everybody,
2
it
weeks
was
ago.
so good.
Nice.
It was so good. Um,
What if it's bad?
it's not going to be. Um, James Gunn will deliver.
Okay, sure.
It's going to be good. Trust
Sure.
me. The other two have been great. Spoilers. People can find me on the Twitter at Sam Heaney. That is HEA anyway.
You can find me at Fabulous Brianna, FabulistBreanna. You can find Save the Game Media on Twitter at Save Game Media or YouTube Save the Game Media. Yeah, come hang out with us. And thanks for hanging out with us for this podcast. Till we see you in like 2 weeks, your time. Bye.
Bye.